Hi, it's Mayor Walter Sendzik, and happy December. So we are now in what would be the full season of celebration for whether it's Hanukkah or it's Christmas or it's Kwanzaa, whatever it may be. We're definitely in the mood for celebrating here in Niagara and St. Catharines, and I wouldn't want to be any other place. And so today, we're going to be talking with a young entrepreneur who has started up a wonderful cosmetic line that has taken the country by storm, I will say that. There's been a lot of just great energy that's coming out of what would be Cheekbone Cosmetics, Cheekbone Beauty. And after the break, we're going to be having some of our staff from the City of St. Catharines talking about our green initiatives. We have a climate change coordinator that has joined our team, and that is Olivia. Will be joined by Mark Green, who is very familiar to the show. He is one of our climate specialists on our team STC. But before we get there, we have Jen Harper, founder of Cheekbone Beauty, and she is an Indigenous owned and founded digitally native Canadian cosmetics company that is here in St. Catharines. And that is awesome. Yeah. That is really awesome. And Jen, you grew up in Thunder Bay, or you were born in Thunder Bay.
Born in Thunder Bay, grew up in St. Catharines.
Grew up in St. Catharines. I love that. And you have a passion for cosmetics.
I do.
So first of all, I just want, where did that passion come from first?
Just I think that childhood nostalgia, those memories of little girl getting into their mother's cosmetics, the trips to the local Shoppers Drug Mart, if you will, playing down that makeup aisle and falling in love with cosmetics. I was saying to someone the other day, those palettes, like a CoverGirl palette, like as soon as we started talking about it, I could remember the smell. So there is something really, I think, that touches us deeply when it comes to makeup as young ladies that we remember. So I've always loved it, adored it. I think no matter what I was doing in life, if I wanted to feel good, buying a lipstick was always easy. So I knew that would be an easy purchase for my future customers.
So it's interesting because it ignited a passion in you, and you have this feeling that was created in as a young person, and then transforming that into a business line. Big step. Like it's a lot of people remember what they did in their childhood, but then taking that and then going, I'm going to create a business. Mm-hmm. Tell me this foundation of that.
So that's a big, long story, because that's like, let's say from 10 to, I started this at 38. So that's a lot of years in between. But looking back, hindsight, it's interesting that, we create a lot of times, I think, our own future by the things that we fall in love and are passionate about. So even as a young child, adoring products and getting my first job in 2008 when I got into sales. I was with a large food distribution company, and at the time they asked on this questionnaire, which I think is bananas now when I think about it, what would be your dream job or career? And I'm like, oh, do I answer working for this company? Because that was like my first week there, but I didn't. I actually wrote to be the CEO of a major cosmetics brand, having absolutely no clue that this would be what I intended to do. We're not major. I remember writing the word major, and I actually called the woman in HR that ran that sales training program for us at Cisco at the time. And I'm like, she had retired. And I'm like, would you have kept all of that paperwork? Because I would be dying to see that piece of paper. But remembering after about a year into working on Cheekbone Beauty, and literally getting chills going, oh my goodness, I wrote that. So that's, I guess, the gist. And then this innate desire in my whole life to do something to support my First Nations Indigenous community. I didn't know what that looked like or what that meant. And then through building Cheekbone, had a dream, first of all, to actually make lip gloss in 2015. And then throughout 2015, I was doing market research, product development, like how am I going to do this? I wanted to make lip gloss and then start a scholarship fund in my grandmother's name, who was a residential school survivor. So that was like the initial idea. Fast forward in all of the research and discovered that doing that fund wouldn't be as easy, and got direction using a business advisory board to say, focus on the business and then find an organization that you are passionate about that you can support. But I never lost sight of that fund. That scholarship fund is still in the works, and we're planning that to launch in 2020.
Right.
But then realizing, those little dreams and those things that in your life, they all come out to play in the end, as long as you keep, I think, focusing on it in some shape or form.
Well, you have the quintessential entrepreneurial mind, because you're focused, but yet you're looking at where the company can go. Where's your ideas going to expand into? So looking at Cheekbone and saying, how can I make a difference in my First Nations community as well? And that's the mind of an entrepreneur. It really is. It's how do I make a difference in what I'm doing? What's my passion today? But how do I make a difference in following my passion as well? And you're the quintessential entrepreneur. And it's great. So just tell the audience a bit about Cheekbone. So what makes it different? You talked about other brands that you saw when you went into the local pharmacy store. What is different with Cheekbone?
So what I learned from my years in food service and beauty, knowing nothing in beauty, having no background in that industry, I learned that they're very similar. There's manufacturers that make the products, and then they're just branded differently. Right. So I knew with my experience in marketing, if I could create a brand using great products, it doesn't mean they're making good or bad products. They're all making great products, and so it was about searching out, finding the right third-party manufacturer, and that was the initial part of trying to bring, I guess, I read a book called The Lean Startup. So it was bringing this minimum viable product to market, because the goal is building our manufacturing right here in Niagara in next year. That's on the plan, but I couldn't go spend $2.7 million on that plan without testing the market. Right. So the last 2-3 years almost, we will have launched on November 26, 2016. So we're almost 3 years. It has been proving, does the market want this brand to exist? And sales, with my experience, are going in this direction. So I know that that's true, that people want this to exist, and now how to make them a better product. So having known that really what I had to do was test the market, and then go out and then now build what we want to build and make an even better product. So
you've got Cheekbone Beauty, and you've invested in the product identification. What are some of the products that are available today?
Okay, and what sets us, I guess, separate from if you look online today, there's 18,000 new cosmetic brands. We're living in an era of many, many digitally native brands. So we're not alone. There's fierce competition. And you're right, what exactly is going to set us apart from everyone else? So not only were we driven to create a brand that really helps Indigenous youth see themselves in a beauty brand. And the reason I felt that I was so passionate about doing that is because I grew up without any role models, zero, nada. Nobody looked like me, any industry or anything I think that you would see in big mass print. So it was hard to relate to people. And then if you don't see yourself in something, you can never picture yourself doing that. So ultimately, my goal as an entrepreneur is to show every Indigenous kid, whether it's in business or beauty, that here you are, because they can see me doing it, and then they could possibly, if they have an idea or something that they want to create, or a dream, if that's how it comes to them, then they can actually fulfill it because they're seeing someone else do it. Now in 2019, of course, we have tons of Indigenous role models. We have an entire line called our Warrior Woman Collection, which was our first line of liquid lipsticks, and they're all named after Indigenous women across North America, or what we call Turtle Island, that are doing incredible works in their community, and not just coming from the entertainment industry or athletes, because that's a lot of time where people look for role models. We purposefully went and found women that were doing other work within their community as well, whether it's an environmental activist or someone who's a lawyer or someone who's in social work. We just wanted to give Indigenous youth this platform so that they can see themselves in these women, and then again have a trail blazed for them. And I think it was Oprah who said when she started out in media or programming, it was only because knowing that Barbara Walters, which is really strange because it's a white woman, but she totally related and thought, well, if Barbara can do this, then so can I. Right. And then you realize how powerful that is when people, and the messages that I receive like daily, whether it be through emails or direct messages on social media from Indigenous youth, they're just so grateful that this brand exists, that they can see themselves, which is so touching. Like, how do I get to be the one to do this? And I feel like it's such a privilege.
That's amazing. What a story. It's a fascinating journey that you're on, and the fact that you can identify that the importance of role modeling is such a key component of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And you were on the national stage. You were on the national stage of Dragon's Den. You talk about platform.
Yes.
And so couldn't have been more proud as a citizen of St. Catharines to see you on our Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, in Dragon's Den. What was that experience like?
Super, it's the scariest thing I've ever done. I went home and told my kids that I've never done anything more terrifying in my life because they tape live. Yeah. There's no cut. I didn't mean to say that. You're walking down those scary steps that you see on TV at the moment that they start taping, and there's just the questions come flying at you. So it was overwhelming, scary, but they were super gracious. I was really fortunate. Like, we've seen the show. They're not always the nicest to people. Right. And in my research prior to the show, they hate the beauty industry or really dislike it because every episode I had watched, you can tell they just, and a lot of them didn't want to invest, and because it's so competitive, and they realize that. One thing Arlene did do after the show was she tweeted that that we were onto something, creating a brand that's about a bigger purpose, representing Indigenous youth, and aside from that, using business to make a difference, it's possible in this day and age. And all of the research that I've done up into building this, if we're looking at Gen Z, that's all they care about. So if you're not creating products for those people, you're going to be out of business. Right. So you need to if you really want to do something, if you really want to be an entrepreneur and do something, that you're really going to have to think about what these next generations want. And we're really fortunate in Canada because we know that these kids in Gen Z, who I know are my next 10 years of customers, they're being taught when it comes to the truth about Indigenous issues in Canada and the world, for that matter, in school, what really happened, right? There's no more, I wasn't taught the truth about what happened. Mm-hmm. I didn't read the TRC till I was 38 years old, which is the final report from the Truth and Reconciliation. And I was blown away. And we're really fortunate that our kids are actually being taught the truth. And so when they actually have that information, they're armed when they actually go shopping. Right.
So Autumn Pelche.
Yes.
And what she's doing on the international stage.
Yes.
And, Greta Thunberg from Sweden, those two young women who are creating a social conscience that in the next generation that will have a ripple effect on everything from the economy to how we see community to how we see society. And so we got about a minute or two left, and just make the connection between that because you've got a new line coming out, and I want to touch on that and tell me a bit about it.
So this is the line that we're really, really proud of. It's sustainable. We literally call it a sustainably, socially conscious product, which is a category that doesn't exist. So we're trying to create this new category in the beauty space where you have a choice to purchase products. So not only are the raw ingredients, we've hand sourced them, are not leaving an impact on the planet, and we're not using things that are causing harm to the planet. So sometimes even natural ingredients. So we have to be very careful when it comes to the word sustainable, that we understand what that really means. And sometimes taking things from the land is actually not really good for it. And we have incredible scientists that helped us create this formulation that is ours and we own it. And then the packaging itself, which is really cool, is biodegradable. So there'll be education on our website where you're removing the plastic insert and then the rest can be composted. Even the ink is eco-friendly and compostable.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So really neat. In St. Catharines, where can you get Cheekbone Beauty?
At Ruby Red Beautiful on James Street in downtown St. Catharines.
Recently owned downtown St. Catharines. And she carries your whole line. She does.
She's probably one of the only retailers that carries everything we sell.
That is amazing. So website, cheekbonebeauty.ca. For those who are on social media, you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter, you're everywhere actually. And I got to know Jen strictly pretty much through social media because you have such a good story that you weave into how you talk about your products. So I'm proud to have you on the show. I hope as we head into December, if you're looking for something to indulge in yourself, or if you want to put something in someone's sock, head out to Ruby Red and check out Cheekbone Beauty. You will not be disappointed. You'll be supporting a local entrepreneur. You'll be supporting someone who is building a foundation for First Nations. You'll be supporting a role model in our community. And it's something that we are all proud of. So Jen, thank you very much for following your passion, and we look forward to a very bright future, and we'll have you on the show again when you're the #1 cosmetics company in Canada. So after the break, we're going to be talking about sustainability, climate change, because we've got a new climate change coordinator, and we've got some exciting plans on how we're going to help be a part of turning back climate change in our community. So stay tuned. And welcome back to our home with Mayor Sendzik, and what a first half of the show with Jen Harper from Cheekbone Beauty. It's great to see local entrepreneurs taking their passion and putting it onto the national stage. And now I'm being joined by Olivia Groff and Mark Green. Mark Green is someone who's been on the show a number of times. He's our, I would say he's our guru around the environmental initiatives here at the City of St. Catharines. He has a degree in environmental sciences and a master's degree in civil engineering from McMaster. So he's smarter than me on a whole bunch of different fronts. And we also went to school together, and he is smarter than me. And he also is our manager of environmental services at the City of St. Catharines. And he's a travel mate of mine because we are both on the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway Initiatives board of directors. He is there as a staff support. I'm there as a board member. And so we're able to really have an impact on how the Great Lakes and the environment around our Great Lakes are being protected by municipalities. And Mark's been a longtime member of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, and this year he won an award there for all the work that he's doing. So very well accomplished and very familiar to the show. But the person beside him is not familiar to the show necessarily, and that is because she has just started at the City of St. Catharines, and she is in the position of Climate Change Adaptation Coordinator. And I got to say, it was great for our city council to approve that position. Olivia comes to us from University of Guelph, where she has a arts and science in ecology and geography. She also graduated from Niagara College in environmental management and assessment. She is a stewardship manager, or was a stewardship manager for Land Care Niagara. And she is the current president of the Niagara Woodlot Association. And she is also a resident of St. Catharines. So this is exactly what we're talking about. When we look at climate change, when we look at how we're building a climate resilient community, and we have a strategic plan that's built on the 4 pillars of community, which is the economy, cultural, social, and environmental. Under the environmental pillar, we talk about how we're building a climate resilient community and how we're pushing back at climate change. And today's discussion is about the efforts that we're taking. So I'm going to start from, Mark, your perspective. What are some of the immediate things that you're seeing as you've been working for the city for 20 years? What are some of the visual cues that climate change is having an impact on our community?
In St. Catharines, we are seeing weather phenomena we just haven't seen before. The clearest example for anyone who's lived in St. Catharines for a while is the Great Lakes, the high lake levels in Lake Ontario for 2019 as well as 2017. We just hadn't seen anything like that before. Lakeside Beach was closed, almost the whole summer. The carousel was closed. And that's not just affects St. Catharines, that affects all the communities all around Lake Ontario. So that's one example. Earlier this year, we saw several back-to-back days just of freezing rain, which is not something you always think about with climate change. You think about hotter, but usually what we're seeing now is just stranger weather, things that we don't typically expect. So freezing rain, that's a big problem. It affects people's mobility, affects transportation systems, school closures. You don't have to tell anyone has kids in school who take the bus, like how many closure days we had last year. That's something that affects a lot of residents. We had a huge rainstorm that was just off Lake Ontario this summer that was probably the biggest one-day rain we've seen in St. Catharines since we've been recording the data. And, so that has a big impact on infrastructure and leads to flooding, affects, residents for sure, both financially as well as the other thing we don't talk about is just, even the stress and mental health implications of someone who's gone through a flood or lost something that's sentimental to them. So those things are like directly affect residents. They may not really link that to climate change themselves, but these things are exacerbated by the weather we have. And that's what the scientists have been predicting for a long time, that weather's going to get more extreme. We're going to see more of these extreme events, and that's what we are starting to see.
Right, and that's why I think it's so important that we're shining a light on this, and people can say, what does climate change mean? And we can't make a difference in the world of climate change, which I don't agree with. I think we all can make a difference. And that kind of localized impact shows that we have to make a difference. Like it's not a wish to make a difference, it's we have to make a difference. And so, Olivia, you're working on a climate change adaptation plan. So talk to us about that, because you're also looking for feedback from the community. So tell us a bit about what you're trying to achieve with the plan.
Yeah. So one thing to remember with climate change is no matter if we stop our emissions tomorrow, we're still in for effects of climate change. Whether we change our practices today or tomorrow, we're going to feel it. So the adaptation plan really is acknowledging that we are in for change, and we have to adapt to where we are headed with climate and the projections that they are telling us. So this plan for the City of St. Catharines really is about understanding that we have to adapt, we have to be proactive in the plan development. We are working with all departments across the City of St. Catharines to understand the implications of knowing we have the climate data, to understand how those are going to affect departments, how they're going to affect the community as well. So the adaptation plan really is about knowing climate data of where we're headed, assessing the opportunities, the risks, and vulnerabilities that are associated with it, and the impacts that we will face as a city, as a community. So really working with the climate data allows us to look into the future, essentially, to figure out what exactly we're in for, to make sure we're adapting to the right ways,
Right.
and being proactive about it.
So when you look at climate adaptation, what are a couple things that you can touch on from a resident's perspective that they would see as a cue that the city's doing something?
Yeah. Well, something to think about would be if we're experiencing more heat days or something like that. Something the city could do or has already done is implementing more shade shelters, putting out those splash pads, making sure that under extreme heat people have a way to cool off. Another way is through the FLAP program, dealing a little bit more about that. So preventing those basement floodings and putting in that backwater valve is also something that the city is actively doing.
Right, and I think that's influencing, because it touches on our budget too. And so, Mark, you're a manager at the city, you're working with different departments as well. Talk a bit about what the city's doing around some of the, I'll say, budgeting for climate change. How are we budgeting for climate change?
Well, one challenge we do have is, because the weather's so unpredictable, the challenges do change year to year. So we could have a year where we have a really extreme winter, and there's going to be a lot more stress on our snow removal operations, how much salt
water
we
mains.
buy, or how many, if it's really cold, we have more water surfaces.
Yeah,
break
so
and
I want to touch
stuff
on
like
that, because I think you and I experienced that a couple of years ago, and I want to remind the public, we went through a very, very cold winter, and it was about 15 days where it was almost minus 20 and below, and we started popping water mains across the city, and that's because the frost line had gone from 4 feet down to 6 feet, and all our water mains are pretty much buried at the 4 feet level. And so you look at that and the amount of money it costs to replace the water mains, that's right in your wheelhouse, because you're all about water protection.
So it affected the water mains, and also a lot of residents, the actual service going to their house froze solid.
Right.
So they literally turned on their tap and they had no water because there's ice essentially blocking the line on their property, which obviously is not sustainable for very long. You can't live in your house without water.
Yeah,
So
running water.
that was a challenge that, again, we hadn't really seen. Maybe in a typical year, there might be 4 or 5 residents who have a frozen service because just on their property it's more shallow. But this year there was hundreds. And again, not just in St. Catharines, our neighboring communities saw the same thing. So that's something that wouldn't necessarily have been budgeted for. It wasn't seen as an issue and happen, but it doesn't happen every year. And that's a huge challenge with budgeting. It's not like we can just put money in a pot to say, okay, this is our climate change. We're going to deal with, with extra water main breaks this year, because next year you may have less water main breaks than normal, but you may have another issue.
High winds taking down trees.
Yeah, so then we have to deal with forestry, or
Yeah.
there was a fire ban the one year, so our fire service had so many
Right.
more complaints and they had to respond to because of that unprecedented nature of it. So that is a challenge when we're budgeting. It's not a stable thing that we can budget for.
Right.
But that's why we want to have this adaptation plan. We want to try and get ahead of this and think, well, what could be happening in the future and how can we prepare for it before it happens? So we have plans in place. We can't fix things necessarily. We can't stop Lake Ontario from rising, but can we, be ready for it, have better communication so we know what's going to happen, have response plans so staff know what to do, the public can expect things. And as we replace our infrastructure, should we be replacing it for the future weather that we expect as opposed to the past weather?
Right.
Because that's the time to maybe make some upgrades and making sure that you have one shot at, when you're putting in a new building or designing a park, let's try and do it right so that we don't want to waste money because we have limited resources. We want to, spend them as efficiently as possible. But do we need to do things differently in the future than we have in the past? And yeah, we probably do.
Right. So Olivia, just touch quickly on Niagara Adapts, which is a collaborative project with Brock University. Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so that all started with basically a couple of municipalities in Niagara getting a grant. And Niagara Adapts or Brock University saw the opportunity for all these municipalities to kind of work together under the collaborative that they started, Niagara Adapts. And it's been a really great way for all the municipalities to learn off of each other. We're all making different adaptation plans. We're all working from the same, how we gathered the data and how we're going to go through the structure of the plan. But in the end, all the adaptation plans are really leading to specific community-driven actions. Right. But Niagara Adapts is really kind of being our leader with, there's a survey that's going to be collected, so that's leading into that component. And they're really making sure that we're kind of on the pulse with academic research to make sure we're getting kind of the best informed decisions moving forward.
So there's a survey, it's online, it's at St. Catharines website.
Yep.
And it's going to be on there until at least late December. Mm-hmm. And so I encourage the public to go online, learn more about the Climate Change Adaptation Survey, fill it out. It has a direct impact on you. It has a direct impact on us. Climate change is here in our community. It's in communities across North America. We're seeing the impacts of a changing climate, and it's going to create some challenges for our community. And what I'm proud of is that we're investing in our staff to be able to provide us with the best plans possible moving forward. I'm proud of the fact that we have a strategic plan that actually addresses climate change within the plan. We have a council that's focused on making sure that we're not just adapting, but we're pushing back at climate change. So rest assured, we are building a climate resilient community, but we're going to need everybody to be a part of it. So there's going to be more information we're going to be sharing once the plan is done. We're going to come back, have Olivia and Mark back on the show, and we'll talk about what we're doing as a collaborative effort moving forward. But until then, make a difference in your community. Try and make sure you're recycling, make sure you're using your organics, make sure you're trying to be a part of what should be a worldwide solution to push back at climate change. So enjoy the holidays. That's an important part. Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, whatever it may be, whatever you're celebrating. Enjoy it with friends and family. And until next time, take care.